Resuming debate, the honourable member from Elmwood-Transcona.
I would like to start, Mr. Speaker, by thanking you and by thanking the House as a whole for a bit of latitude for my last words in the House of Commons.
I want to start by saying thank you to all the people in Elmwood-Transcona that have made my presence here in the House of Commons over the last 8.5 years possible. I want to say thank you to all the people who supported me coming here. I also want to say thank you to all the people who shared feedback over the years, including and perhaps especially when they didn't agree, at least the constructive feedback. And as members here in this chamber know, I mean, we strive to get back to everyone as best we can, but even when we can't, hearing from people, reading their letters helps inform what we bring to this House of Commons, and I've had the benefit of the wisdom of many people through the riding over the last 8.5 years, and I say a big thank you to them. I want to say a particular thank you to my wife Janelle, who is on Parliament Hill today for my final remarks. Her sacrifices in order to make this time for me to be here have been incredible, and I wouldn't have been able to serve folks in Elmwood-Transcona without her hard work at home, making all of this possible for me and for our family. And I'm very grateful to Janelle for all of that work.
Hear, hear. Bravo.
She's deserving of all that applause and much more. My sons Robert and Noah are here today along with my mother Brenda, and I want to say thank you to them for all the ways that they've supported me. And my whole family, my sisters Rebecca, Jessica, and Tessa, and my late father Bill, of course, who was a great friend and mentor. Been fortunate over the years to have a great staff team. I think people here know as well that you can't do this job without a lot of support in many different ways. And I've been fortunate to have a lot of people come work for me in various ways over the years. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my two longest serving staff members, Ariel, who worked with me here in Ottawa and at home in the riding organizationally and did a fantastic job and has moved on to bigger and better things, and Paul in my constituency office, who's anchored me there and helped mentor many new staff as they come into the office. It's been a real honor to serve in this place and with a wonderful NDP caucus, and I could spend a lot of time talking about all the ways in which the members of this caucus have improved my own thinking on a lot of issues and supported me through challenging political and personal endeavors. I'm just going to do one quick shout out to the member for North Island, Powell River, who's sitting right here, because she's been our whip, and a really amazing whip, and I think people ought to know the whip is not always a bad thing. And this particular whip has carried herself in a way that's been very important to me and to our entire caucus. I'm also proud to have served under a leader, the member for Burnaby South, who's been relentless in putting the needs and interests of people first. He's been focused on the needs of working people who more and more are going to work every day and feeling like they're falling further behind when they should be getting ahead. He's been focused on the needs of seniors who did work their whole life and are finding that their pension can no longer sustain them. And he's been dedicated to the needs of people who, for many different reasons, aren't able to work and who nevertheless deserve to live in dignity and security, and in a country like Canada, we should be able to do that for them. Well, I say that because, not just because it's something to say, but I say that because there's a list of achievements that you can point to over the last 4 or so years that the NDP has been critical in driving through the House. I think of helping people and small businesses through the challenges of the pandemic. I think of the incredible expansion of childcare that we're witnessing across Canada. I think of dental services being made available for millions of Canadians for the first time. I think of access to prescription drugs, particularly diabetes and contraception medication that's now going to be available across the country. I think of workers' rights, 10 paid sick days, a first, anti-scab legislation that's moving through Parliament now, conditions on investment tax credits for the new energy economy that are going to require that union prevailing wages are paid to workers and that apprentices are hired onto those jobs so that investment in the new energy economy doesn't leave workers behind. I think of the times we forced the government to double the GST rebate as a way to help people that needed it in a time of incredible inflation without making the mistake of contributing even more to that inflation. I think of the advocacy for Indigenous right and title that the NDP caucus has done in this place and the over $8 billion for Indigenous housing that we've helped to secure. I think of my colleague from Winnipeg Centre who's been pioneering the Red Dress Initiative. I think of the work we've done to advocate for a swift implementation of the Canada Disability Benefit and calling for finally employment insurance reform that will do justice to workers. We know it's possible. We saw movement in the pandemic, but we need it to happen now, even as we look to the future and things like a guaranteed livable basic income in order to make it easier for all Canadians to live with dignity. We've been refusing to let the Prime Minister's cynicism about electoral reform end the conversation about proportional representation and changing the voting system here on Parliament Hill, and I've been proud to be part of efforts to keep that conversation alive.
Hear, hear.
We pushed to take back some of the excess profits that banks and insurance companies made during the pandemic and permanently raised their corporate tax rate from 15 to 16.5%. And we've been adamant about holding big CEOs to account for the role that outsized corporate profits have played in contributing to inflation, something you just don't hear enough talk about in this place unless New Democrats are on their feet. There's more to that list, but I'm conscious of the time, Mr. Speaker, and I'm optimistic and hopeful and confident that the next member for Elmwood-Transcona will have much more to say and much more to do on important issues like that. To my mind, the common thread that moves through all of these various issues isn't just a desire, but a moral imperative to empower every person to take command of their own destiny and to do so in full recognition of the extent to which we're all interconnected. I say this because I'm sometimes tempted by the fantasy of kind of going out in the wilderness and living a quiet life. And perhaps that's a viable and attractive option for some, Mr. Speaker. But for most of us, economic imperatives, technology, and the inescapable impacts of climate change push us toward each other and require that we practice our independence in a space negotiated with others. It's why I believe the proper exercise of individual freedom, if everyone is to enjoy it, is fundamentally a cooperative and not a competitive project. Competition has its place in the economy just as it does in politics. But if we lose sight of the fundamentally cooperative project, our competitive instincts can often do more harm than good. It's not a new insight. It's animated our political movement from the beginning. It's at the core of the unique Canadian brand of prairie democratic socialism, pioneered by renowned Canadian political leaders like J.S. Woodsworth and Tommy Douglas, that I count myself proud to be a part of.
Hear, hear.
Often when we talk about freedom, the conversation revolves around questions about government. These are appropriate debates. Government intervention can go wrong, and sometimes it's exactly the wrong solution to a problem. But there are other times when it's either the best or the only solution. Reasonable people can disagree about what extent of government involvement is appropriate in a particular circumstance, but Canadian Social Democrats have always been aware that power doesn't just reside in government. It resides in the many places and ways that people relate to each other. And some of those most important relationships are economic ones. Where people lack economic security, Mr. Speaker, they lose the power to dictate the course of their lives. You can be entitled to all the freedoms you want on paper, but without economic power, a person can't exercise those freedoms. That's why New Democrats are concerned not only to hold governments to account, but to hold the CEOs and lobbyists who wield immense economic power to account as well. It's why we believe it's so important that governments and investors respect Indigenous right and title, and that Indigenous peoples are empowered to manage their own affairs. It's why we're concerned to root out systemic racism, gender discrimination, homophobia, and ableism from our institutions. It's why we say no to allowing a small corporate elite to sacrifice the health of the planet in the name of their own short-term gain. And when we fail at these things, we take away power from some people to determine their own future so that others have more power to pursue preferences that trespass on the freedom and dignity of others. We believe that by respecting the rights and freedoms in others in all their diversity, we can negotiate a better future for everyone. We don't pretend it's easy work, and we recognize it'll mean asking some of the wealthiest among us to moderate their expectations of luxury and indulgence, but it's by no means asking them to live a bad life. Our current system asks many people to live in poverty and hunger. so that a small few can live in lavish luxury. The fact is, this has long been the case, doesn't make it right. The extent to which that system persists is a testament to the real power that exists outside the democratic system, but by working together, we can use the democratic system to tame it and ensure everyone gets a fair share. Our emphasis on economic democracy is why New Democrats support strong collective bargaining, the credit union movement, Indigenous right and title, cooperatives of all kinds, publicly owned corporations for some things, and strong regulations in private markets that tend toward corporate oligopoly, as well as other tools to make sure that small groups of people beyond democratic control don't get to dictate how most people earn a living or access essential goods and services. There are many ways to go about things, and Parliament is a place where people come to debate those. And yes, it's a place, Mr. Speaker, where people come to disagree, to be sure, but also to find a path forward that unites us. It's why we can't understand the role of parliamentary opposition just as to oppose for the sake of opposing. And I hope that in my time here as part of a team that has been dedicated to the interests of people, we've shown how you can do the good work of opposition and holding people in power to account, while nevertheless going out of your way to find those places where you can collaborate and make progress on the things that matter to people, even as you disagree about other important things. And so I thank you once again, Mr. Speaker, for a little bit of latitude, both in terms of subject and time, to put those final remarks on the record.